Welcome everyone to today's session of the monthly eLID webinar series. We have in our midst today a special guest who's going to take us through a special topic as well. So if you can just put in the chat now where you're joining us from. Are you joining from the UK? Put your GMT, please. United States of America, Africa, wherever you're joining from, put in the chat. Welcome. I also love to ask what the temperature is at your end. So where are you joining us from? Hey, welcome Emma from UK. I'm joining from UK as well. Olama from Lagos, Nigeria. Welcome, welcome. Victoria from Lagos, Nigeria. Welcome everyone. So it's 61 Fahrenheit here today. Amazing. Amazing. What was the temperature at your end, Victoria, Olama? I'm pretty sure my temperature is almost the same as Emma's own as well. So while I wait for our responses, I'll just quickly talk a bit about myself. My name is Oyindamola Ojo-Eriamiato. If you haven't met me before, I am the founder of the eLearning and Instructional Designers Hub, and also the Chief Learning Officer at Beckamola Learning Solutions. I'm an event board director at the Learning Network. I love to build communities. I have this passion to help professionals, develop their career through coaching, mentoring, facilitation, bootcamp experiences. And this is why I started the initiative, eLID Hub, to help learning professionals build skills in digital learning design. And about the eLID initiative, about the eLID Hub, we have our free monthly webinars like we're having today. We conduct e-learning workshops where we get our hands dirty using different tools to create effective learning. And I'm really excited again to mention to us that our very first conference is happening in May. If you haven't registered, make sure you do. We're going to be sharing the link very soon. And we also help people transition by being involved in a cohort-based boot camp, which is our flagship learning course in digital learning design. Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for that. So if you haven't joined us, you're going to be seeing links in the chat. Links in the chat for you to join us and follow us on all our platforms. We're on LinkedIn, we're on Instagram. We have a YouTube channel where we upload all the resources, all our workshops. We have a WhatsApp group, which is our community, where we engage. It's a very engaging community where you can join us. So without wasting much of our time, I'm going to be introducing our special guest today. Her name is Emma Klosson. I hope I pronounced it correctly.
It's Emma, but yes, close
Emma, Emma Klosson, welcome, welcome, welcome. And Emma is a multi-award winning learning and development professional. She's also Kirkpatrick certified. She has over 2 decades experience in learning and development, and she has worked with some of the world's leading brands. She's going to be sharing her LinkedIn profile with us later today to connect with her, and you're going to be seeing her profile really hot. She's an expert in need analysis and learning evaluation. Emma is passionate about creating meaningful, outcomes-focused and learner-centric experiences that transform learner behaviors and positively impact business results. So let's welcome her warmly by putting some lovely emojis in the chat. Right now, let's welcome Emma. Welcome, welcome, Emma. Welcome. So over to you, Emma. Yeah, welcome.
Thank you so much. What a lovely welcome. I really appreciate it. All right, now let's just do the awkward bit where I try to figure out how to share my screen again. Here we go. And I can just, there we go. All right, here we go. Let me know if you can see my screen. Yeah. All right. Welcome. Good evening, everyone. It's so lovely to be here. Thank you for having me. It's an absolute pleasure. I'm going to do another quick introduction, if that's okay. I'm Damola, and tell you a little bit more about me and my background, and then I promise we'll go on to the really good stuff. So, as Damola told you, I have a 20-year career in learning and development. I began working with Virgin Atlantic, which is Richard Branson's airline, if you're familiar with that. And I started my training career as a subject matter expert. So I used to work at the airport doing a certain job, and then the training team said to me, "Hey, do you want to come and teach people how to do that?" And I said, "Well, yeah, but I don't know the first thing about training." So I was very lucky. Virgin paid for me to do something called a certificate in training practice, which was with a UK organisation called CIPD. And that was, 2001, about 20 years ago now. But what I learned then, I'm still using today. And the really nice part was that straight away I could use that learning, apply it to what I already knew about the job. And it was pretty easy. But where things got interesting and more complicated was when I moved a couple of years later to the States, and I kept my job with Virgin. But the job that I had before, teaching people, actually it was aircraft weight and balance, didn't exist over there. And I had to teach check-in and ground staff work, which I knew nothing about. So this is really where I would say truly I got started with learning and development, and especially needs analysis, because suddenly I had to teach something I knew nothing about. And so this is where I started doing all of my questioning, asking people how they worked, what they did, what made it easy for them, interviewing people, watching them at work, so that I could then go away and create a learning experience that met their needs, and also sort of move their performance forward. Fast forward a few years, I finished work at the airline, loved it, but really was looking for more of a challenge. And so I took a job as a learning and development manager. This was in the States, and had 6 glorious years working for a manufacturing company who had no training programs in place before. So I got to start everything from scratch. So got an LMS and loads of content, put together a sales training program, onboarding, customer training, internal training, worked with some universities and colleges to help fill some gaps, secured some grant money, just really kind of tried a little bit of everything, and it was really wonderful. Then a few years later, I was offered a position with a former colleague from Virgin, actually, at a company called the Centre for Leadership Studies. And these are the people who helped create situational leadership, which is a well-known leadership model. And they were looking for someone to join their custom learning team to help their clients develop some leadership training. And I leapt at this chance because, first of all, I'd done everything I felt I could do at the manufacturing company in terms of sort of starting things from scratch. But also I was really curious to see what learning and development looked like from the other side of the fence, working for a learning provider rather than an in-house learning manager. And it was really insightful, no budgets to worry about, all of these resources and teams at my disposal. It was really exciting. And then finally, I landed where I am today. In 2016, I joined an organization called SweetRush, who are a US-based custom learning company. And as Damola mentioned, we work with many of the world's leading brands to create custom learning solutions, mostly e-learning and digital learning solutions, although we've also got sort of a really experienced XR and VR team. So we do, a lot of immersive learning solutions as well. And we're actually even in the process right now of launching some AI-powered solutions. So using AI tools within the learning experience itself to help learners create some adaptive learning experiences. So really on the cutting edge of learning technologies. in my current role, I work as a learning evangelist. So I've stepped away from being a practitioner, and now I create content like ebooks, articles, webinars to help shine a light on the work that we're doing as a company, but also in the industry. So I'm researching trends and writing about those, which I absolutely love doing. I also work on an award strategy, which is one of my favourite things to do. But enough about that. I am really excited to be here with you today to talk about one of my favourite topics, which is needs analysis. And I think, Damola, maybe we can confirm this. I'll be back at some point to talk to you all about learning analysis too. So if it's not next month, then it will be maybe the one after. I think we need to confirm that. And that is my true passion. So if you think I'm excited about this, just wait till you get me going on learning evaluation. And both of those topics are really closely connected. So if you manage to make it to both the sessions, you'll see how these two things connect. But let's get going and look at our agenda for today. So we are going to talk about needs analysis. We're going to talk about what a needs analysis is. I'm going to help you think through how to structure a needs analysis, including looking at how those findings are going to inform your learning solution design. And I understand from talking to Damola that you're mostly doing e-learning, and I know that you're working, most of you, in a boot camp right now and looking at needs analysis. So I'm going to be taking you through a very high level look at needs analysis today. And then at the end, we'll have some time for some questions and answers. But if you've got anything that you think of while I'm talking, just feel free to pop it in the chat, and we can either take a pause or park it for a bit later on. So what is a needs analysis? Broadly speaking, it's a process that we use to identify the needs of the business, stakeholders, and learners. Sorry, that threw me off. And learners before we prepare a learning solution. And there are two different ways that we look at needs analysis. And I'm going to share these with you today because one of the challenges we often hear in learning, if you look at any trends reports or research, is that learning needs analysis is complicated. It takes time. Nobody has time to do it. Nobody has money to do it. And I want to show you that there's two different things that we're talking about. One of them, yes, does take time. It is complex. It does, it's something that really you need to invest a lot of time and energy in. The other one is very quick and easy. So we're going to be focusing our conversation on the quick and easy one today, but I'm going to show you what both of them are so that you have that context. So here is learning needs analysis. This is the big complicated one. So this is a type of analysis that helps businesses identify and prioritize future learning needs. So this is usually a large-scale activity. It involves partnering with the business to review the company's strategic goals, and they're usually looking at sort of the next 2 to 5 years, and then determining what knowledge and skills the organisation, so not individual learners, but as an organisation, they will need to meet those goals. I imagine right now, for example, that a lot of organisations are looking at the next 2 to 5 years and thinking about the AI training that they're going to need, right? How are they going to implement training around AI and implementing AI into their services and products? Then, so needs analysis it's about readying the workforce to meet future goals. It's very much forward thinking and a proactive activity at this particular scale. And as I mentioned, it can be quite complex to complete. Teams will look at the strategy documents. They're going to look at competency frameworks. They'll complete gap analysis. They'll look at skills. They'll look at competencies and all sorts of other assessments. And then the end result is a report and a detailed roadmap that's distributed to the company executives so that they can determine where to prioritize that training. This is not what we're doing today. So we're going to do something much more straightforward. So we're going to look at something called training needs analysis. And I will also say here that these terms are used interchangeably, right? So some people call this learning needs analysis and the other one training needs analysis. For the purpose of today, I've separated them this way. This type of analysis is carried out when we, as learning professionals, are asked to help with a specific training request. So, hey, can we get some onboarding? Or can we do something for our sales team? Or we need compliance training. And here, the goal is to find out everything we can about this request so that we can go away and design a successful solution. This type of needs analysis is tactical and it's more of a reactive approach. Even though we're doing proactive things within it, it's something where somebody comes to us, asks us to do training, then we react with some needs analysis. It's much less complex and takes much less time to complete, unless it's a really big project, of course. But overall, it's much easier to do than this more strategic needs analysis. And that's good because this is, as I mentioned, what we're going to be talking about today. So now we know what it is, let's talk a little bit about why we do it. As learning designers, you have got 3 different audiences that you need to please. This is the one that we all think of, right? So our learners, and naturally we want to create a learning experience that our learners are going to enjoy and gain something from. But we've also got stakeholders and our project owners, and these are the people who have commissioned the training. And we need to understand what these people are looking for from the learning solution too, right? What does success look like to them? And then our third audience, the third lot of people we've got to please, are the business leaders. And we might not ever actually see or speak to these people, but they're still very important because these are the people that your stakeholders or project owner reports to. And these are the people who will want to know whether the training that we created was worthwhile and cost effective. So to keep all 3 of these audiences happy, we need to understand what each one wants and what each one needs. Because if we don't, we're going to run the risk of designing training solutions that lack impact and don't achieve the desired outcomes. And worse, when it comes to people like business leaders, if we're not able to show that our training had value, this is where training budgets start to get cut, right? And the organization of learning itself is looked at as not being worthwhile or valuable. There's another reason we do needs analysis. We want to make sure that training is the right solution or that it is the only solution. So let's take a look at what I mean by that. Sometimes training is not the answer to our problem. Sometimes our stakeholders, so these are the people that are requesting the training, remember, they might ask us, or more frequently, they'll tell us to create training for a solution, a training solution, excuse me, for a problem that doesn't exist. And I can give you a really good example of this. So years ago, when I worked at the manufacturing company, I had the VP of sales came over to me and asked me to retrain his entire sales force on the company's sales database. He told me that the teams weren't using it properly and that they all need to be...
The reason why is that even somebody that are giving honorary.
Okay. So yeah, he said that everyone needed to be retrained. And these people had only been trained on this system a year ago. So they've only just received this training. The sales team had about 30 members from all over the United States, and the leader wanted to fly them all in to Connecticut to our headquarters and train them for 2 to 3 days on this database. Now, as the learning and development manager, it would have been really easy for me to say, oh yeah, sure, no problem. Let's just bring them in and make that happen. But I wanted to understand what was going on first because it felt like this was a weird need, right? If they've all just been through the training. So I asked the manager if I could talk to some of the salespeople just to get a little bit more information from them. And when I spoke to the sales team, every single one of them told me, oh, we know how to use the software. We just don't want to use it. We just don't want to do these reports. And so what they were being asked to do was every Friday and then once a month, they had to fill out all of this data. They had to send a report to the VP of sales. They had to fill out another one at the end of the month. And none of them understood why they were doing it. They all felt that it was taking them away from other more important work. They were all telling me they were too busy. None of them believed that anyone was actually looking at these reports. They didn't understand what was happening with the data afterwards. So it was very revealing. So I took this feedback back to our VP of sales, and he had no idea that this was going on. He had no idea that the sales team felt this way. So instead of flying everyone in, he gathered them all on a Zoom call, or I think it was GoToMeeting back then. I'm going to show my age now, but it was a platform like this one. And he, for an hour, just sat and spoke to them, explained to them, you know, why it was important that they filled out these reports, what happens to the data, how it will benefit them as sales leaders to do this report, how it trickles back into the business and how the business uses this information. And that was all it took, just this 1 hour intervention to change their mindsets, to change their beliefs, to change their attitudes. And they all went off, not quite all of them, but most of them went back and started doing these reports. So, you know, this process of needs analysis, of talking to the learners, understanding a bit more about the business, ended up saving the company tens of thousands of dollars, right? From flying them all in, gathering them all together for a couple of days. So yeah, really important to think about. So needs analysis can help us determine whether training is really needed or not. Now then, there are going to be exceptions to this rule, right? So there are training requests that will come through and they're completely legitimate, and we don't have to challenge our stakeholders or sort of go and find out, hey, do we really need this? This will include things like training on new products or services, systems, tools, policies, right? Any of those types of training requests, of course, we just take them straight away and you know, go ahead and make that work, make that happen. New hire onboarding, anything that's role-specific, task-based training, of course, we're going to go away and develop that. Mandatory training, so compliance, safety, EIB, none of these things we need to challenge. We can just say, okay, now we can do some needs analysis to find out how to make it a great experience, but we're not going to have to sort of question whether or not this is needed. All right, so we know what a needs analysis is. We know why we do it. Let's take a closer look to figure out how to structure it. But I'm going to just take a quick pause, see if there are any questions so far. And if not, I'll keep going. Okay, it sounds like
I have
so.
a question, Emma.
Yeah.
Okay, so I wanted to ask, from wonderful insights so far. Thank you so much. So I wanted to know, how do you balance the feedback you receive from, you just gave a very beautiful example with the sales team analysis you just gave on the fact that you needed to speak to the team members to determine if the training is actually required. Haven't spoken to their supervisors, I believe, and the HODs, right? So, but my question is, how do you balance each of the feedbacks? Because on one hand, while the feedback from the team members was super important and that helped save the company a lot of money, but sometimes you would also discover that these team members would require trainings that are not specific to their exact roles. They could give you feedback for trainings they require that it's something they may want to do in future. I don't know if that's realistic, but not exact to the roles they are doing right away. So in that regard, would you rather get a feedback from their supervisors or their heads of department? Would you rather take in the feedback a supervisor or a HOD give you for that team members as against what you get from the team members? I just want to know, where do you create the balance?
Sure.
I don't know if my question makes sense.
It does. It's a great question, but I think also it speaks to two very different things, right? So the example I gave you was of a performance problem, right? So the manager, his name's Chad. Chad had this perceived performance problem. He's looking at his team saying they're not doing this thing properly. And so before I went and built the training, I'm like, okay, let's talk to the team and find out what might be a barrier to them not performing properly. I think what you're asking me is more about personal development and other types of learning like you say, that's outside of their role that might help them, move along in their career. That I would say is separate. That's usually handled by HR. And it would be part of an individual development plan. So that's something that a conversation that would usually happen between their manager, maybe on an annual, maybe even sooner basis. But they're two very different things. So there's no need to balance those, I would say, because one is more about sort of preparing and developing your skills for the future, and another is about tackling a very specific performance need that's in the moment. Does that help or make sense?
Yes, yes, it does. Thank you.
Very welcome. It's a great question. Thank you. All right, shall we continue? Okay. And keep your questions coming, please. I can pause at any time here. All right, so now we're going to take a look at how to structure a needs analysis and how your findings inform the design. And I've put these two things together because I'm going to kind of look at them as a pair. And I'm going to stop for a moment and just call out that this session is designed to help you think about how to work through needs analysis. And I want to be sort of honest and upfront with you that you're not going to leave here today with all the tools and all the steps that you need, but hopefully you'll have a clearer understanding of how needs analysis can help you improve your learning design. Along those lines, I don't want you to look at this and think to yourself, oh my gosh, I'm not doing any of these things, right? It's okay. What I'm going to show you are the overall considerations that we make when designing a learning solution. I've been a learning designer for 20 years and I still don't do all of the things that I'm showing you all of the time. It's kind of like a toolbox. You pick the ones that you need when you need them. But I'm hoping that by showing you what's possible and what some of the best practices are, you can take away, even if it's just one or two things, right, to use on your next project. I'm also going to mention here that I'm going to get a copy of the slides to all of you. I've designed the slides. You'll see they're quite wordy. I try not to put words on slides, but because I want you to have these as a resource afterwards, hopefully they'll be useful after the fact. And I know that Oyandamola's recording this also, so you'll have the recording to come back to you. I've also written an ebook, which is free, and I'm going to get the link to Oyandamola afterwards so that she can share that with you, as well as an article where I talk about all of these things in much more detail. So for today, I'd like you to just sort of sit back, relax, take it in sort of at this level. And then if you want to go deeper, I've got some more resources that I can share with you that kind of dive into a little bit deeper. Okay. All right. So hopefully, and I'd love to see in the chat, hopefully this acronym here, ADDIE, won't be a complete mystery to you, but please let me know in the chat if this is something you're familiar with a quick yes or no. I'd love to find out. Have you heard of ADDIE before? And do you know what it means? We're going to go through it, but I just want to find out how many of you. Let's see what we got going on in here. Oh, I can't see. Oyandamola, can you help me and tell me what we're seeing?
Yeah, yes.
Yes, great. Okay. All right. So ADDIE then, as you'll know, is a framework that we use for learning design. It's been around for decades. I think it started in the military in the US. It falls in and out of fashion with learning professionals. I love it. I think it's a great framework. I think where people don't love it is where they think you've got to follow it religiously, but you don't. It's really just kind of a guideline to help you think through the different steps that we need to go through when we're designing learning. And for me, I love to use it to help plan out my needs analysis. So today we're going to use this as our structure to think about all of the different things that we need to capture and identify when we're creating our learning design. Excuse me. So we're going to work through it step by step. So first of all, then I'm going to whiz through this bit really quickly. ADDIE begins with A, which is our analysis, and this is where all good learning design should begin. The first D here, this is the first of two Ds. This is for design. I'm going to come back to all of these and go through them again in a moment. Next D, development. So this is when we go off and develop our solution. I is for implementation. E is for evaluation. And you'll see here that I've added some arrows to this slide because, you know, when we put ADDIE across the page like this, it looks like it's a very linear process, but actually it's very much not. It's circular. We do our analysis at the beginning to inform each step of the ADDIE process. But rather than wait until the end to evaluate everything, we should be taking regular pauses as we work through the middle bits, so the design, development, and implementation, to evaluate whether what we're doing matches up to our analysis that we did at the beginning. Another thing that I want to call out here is that even though analysis has its own box, right? So A at the very beginning, it's actually something that happens throughout the ADDIE process. So what we're going to do in a moment is I'm going to look at the sort of the true analysis work. So this is kind of more big picture stuff. And then we'll work through each of the other letters. So design, development, implementation, evaluation. I'll show you how needs analysis also feeds into those 4 areas. So we're going to look at this chart a lot. As I mentioned, hopefully the slides that you can take away afterwards will be a good refresher. But I just wanted to call that out because it's analysis kind of appears everywhere, really. It's not a sole activity. All right. So when we are talking about analysis here, though, this is our first step. We want to understand the overall project, right? We want to understand the big picture details. So here we want to understand and uncover what drove the training need. What is the problem that we think training is going to solve? And that's a really, really nice way to look at it. And I say this because quite often, as in the case of the story I told you earlier, right, our stakeholders, these are the people that request training, often come to us with a solution in their head. My team needs sales training, right? And that would be just like us going to the doctor saying, I've got a headache, I need an MRI and brain surgery next Tuesday, right? We don't do that. And yet our stakeholders do it to us all the time. So our job is to sort of sit and go, well, hang on a minute, what's going on? You know, why do you need this training? What's the real problem? And I am going to fly through this, but if you take a look at the book that I mentioned earlier, and I'll point you to an article, goes into this particular piece in a lot more detail, gives you some really good, helpful tips for getting this information out of your stakeholders in a way that they're not going to feel too challenged. The next thing we want to understand are the business outcomes. And so here we want to understand, you know, what is it that we hope training will do for the business? And here we're looking at very specific, very measurable things like, you know, increasing sales or improving customer satisfaction ratings or employee engagement. Ultimately, training should have an impact somewhere at some point. And again, I can go into some much more detail and some other resources for you. Next, we want to know who the training is for, who are the people that need training, and that can make a difference to these business outcomes. This is your target audience for your learning. Sometimes it will be 5 people, sometimes it will be 500,000 people, depending on the size of your organization. And knowing what that number is will help you really think through, okay, what do I need to design here? Next, you want to know what the performance gaps are. So this is where you ask, okay, what should they be doing? And what are they doing now? And then the bit that's in the middle is what you're actually going to teach. So really important to understand that. And then finally, as part of this upfront analysis, you'll want to identify, not finally, almost finally, you'll want to understand the constraints. So this is things like the budget, scope, the time that you have to do this. And, you know, to give another sort of extreme example, if you're given a budget of $100,000, 6 months and 4 people, your learning solution is going to be very different than if you were given a budget of $10,000 and 6 weeks and 1 person, right? So understanding what you're dealing with, how much resources you have, will really impact how you go on and design your solution. And then finally, you'll want to identify the barriers to success. And actually, we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about what these barriers are a little bit later on. So who can help you with this? Drum roll, stakeholders. Luckily, all of the answers to these questions can be provided by your stakeholders. As I mentioned, I have got an article that will, go through this in much more detail, and the book will get you the link to that afterwards also. But the first question is that we'll ask our stakeholder is, what does the training need, right? So again, this is straightforward, but it helps you understand and determine whether training is the solution or not. If you don't understand what it is you're trying to solve, you're not going to be able to create a solution to match. Then you're going to ask them, why is this important to the business? And as a follow-up, you might want to ask, what might happen if we don't address this? Asking these questions will help you pinpoint the exact problem that training will solve. And it's also going to help you position the learning later on to your learners, right? So this was the missing piece in the example I gave you earlier. The sales team were given training in a sales database, but at no point were they told why it was important to the business or why they should do it. So the training didn't work. Then we want to find out who it affects, right? So again, is it just a handful of people? Is it all the people? And with our sales team, it ended up, that the sales manager spoke to all of them, but in actual fact, it was probably only about half of that 30 people that weren't doing the report. So understanding who and how many people it affects will really help you to pinpoint your design. And it also helps later on when you're thinking about how to pitch it, right? So if you've got newcomers or more seasoned employees or really experienced people, you can figure out what they look like and how to adjust your training to meet their needs. You can also ask your stakeholders at this point what success looks like. And this really leads into evaluation, which we'll touch on a little bit later, but again, we'll come back to in a separate session later on. So here is where you want to understand, what success looks like. How will we know that this training program has ticked all the boxes for the stakeholder? And then we've got the constraints again, so they'll be able to tell you cost, budget, timeline. And then finally, the barriers. And again, I'm going to touch on the barriers in a separate piece in just a few minutes here. All right, so that's the true, what I call the true sort of upfront needs analysis that you'll do that helps you kind of figure out your North Star for your project, right? So once you have the answer to those questions, you know what you're dealing with, who it's for, what the outcomes should be. The rest of the needs analysis is going to help inform how you design your program, how you develop it, how you implement it, and how you evaluate it. So here's the design process. Now, when you're designing your learning solution, you are going to be thinking about things like your learning objectives and outcomes, right? So what the learner will know and be able to do by the end of it. You're looking at things like how to sequence, structure, and organize your content. You will be looking at how to keep your learners engaged throughout the process, what sort of activities and interactions they'll be doing. You may even think about the modality, right? So I know most of you here are e-learning specialists and experts, but maybe classroom training will be best for your learners based on what you understand and learn about them. Then we also think about our evaluation strategies. So how will we build tests and quizzes and exams and things to make sure that that the learners have actually learned what we said that they would. So the needs analysis that gets wrapped around all of that are, understanding the answers to these questions. You'll see everything kind of matches up, right? So we need to know, what do learners need to know and be able to do? Does the content have to be presented in a certain order? And, an easy way to sort of separate these two things right now is, is the training something where you're learning something step by step? Do you have to do one thing before you do the next thing? Is it procedural training? In which case the learning will have to follow a certain format. If it's more of a concept, right? So we're teaching them about a sales technique or a sales model, we may present the concept first and then do some practice, right? So understanding what type of content you're dealing with will help you understand how best to structure it. We also want to know how learners like to learn, right? Because we don't want to create experiences that they're going to find boring. We want to make sure that they're fully engaged at all times. We want to understand which modality is going to be best. Is it e-learning? Is it virtual training like this? Is it a classroom training? Is it a blend of all three? How will we measure success? What types of quizzes are we going to build? So the items here in pink are all things that your learners can help with. So as part of your analysis for the design phase, you can talk to your learners and get the answers to most of these questions. So when you meet with your learners, you're going to ask them, how do you like to learn? When do you like to learn? When are you able to learn, right? So this is really key for employees who have jobs that are difficult to step away from, right? So whether, you know, maybe they work in retail or manufacturing, or have roles that aren't sort of corporate roles where they're sitting at their desk all day. So understanding when they're available to take training and where they're able to take training is going to have a huge impact on the training that you develop. And as e-learning designers, you know, thinking about manufacturing or retail staff, they may need something that, you know, they can take sort of 10 minutes on an iPad, right, in between helping customers or working on something. On the complete flip side of that, their managers may prefer if we just take them away for a whole day, stick them in a classroom and teach them and be done and dusted. So understanding about your learners, when they can learn, where they can learn, will really help think through those decisions when it comes to choosing your modality and timing of the learning. And then the other thing that's really nice to find out from your learners is who or what they rely on for help. So if you're teaching them something that's performance-based, let's say, you know, call center staff, where they, you know, have to make decisions on the fly, find out how they're currently doing their work, because quite often what you'll find is, you know, they end up tapping their colleague on the shoulder and like, well, actually, this person helps me when I get stuck. And if you find things like that out when you're doing your learner needs analysis, then you can figure out, okay, do we need to ask this person to help us design the training? You know, what are the common things that they're going to other people for help, and let's make sure that we're building that into the learning. Other instances is where you'll find people with little sticky notes, right, with information written all over them. We call these job aids and performance support tools. You know, understanding how learners are relying on information in the workplace to get their work done will help you make sure you're building the right tools for them. So that's design for learners. Also, as part of your needs analysis for design, measuring success, this is where you can go back to your stakeholders. When you ask them what success looks like, that's where we'll kind of match those two pieces together. All right, on to development. So this is the second D in the ADDIE process. This is how we, you know, create all the materials, all of the content that we're going to use and to teach from. So this is where we're creating learner materials, facilitator materials and content and guides, handouts, supporting materials, post-training job aids. So just what we talked about, how can we replace this sticky note with something that's going to be much more valuable and useful in the workplace, assessments. So all of this is what we're actually building, right? We've done our design and now we're building the thing. And we use needs analysis to help us identify, okay, what do we need to build? Do we, you know, what kind of learning materials do we need to build? You know, how can we create an engaging experience so that our learners are fully immersed and fully engaged and hopefully active during the learning experience? What do we need to think about? We also need to think about our facilitators. So if we're creating instructor-led training or even virtual instructor-led training like we're doing, well, this is webinar, but if this was training, you know, what do I need as an instructor to make sure that I'm able to teach you through this medium? What else do we need to support the learning? Are there activities, games, you know, assessments, quizzes that we need to craft? And what might they look like? Will learners need performance support tools? So as I keep showing the sticky note, what else can we do to give them to make them successful in the workplace once they leave the classroom? What might they need to help keep that learning going when they get back into the workplace? And how will we check that they've actually acquired that knowledge and skills? And this comes back to evaluation. So lots to think about here too, but again, our stakeholders and our learners can help us with this. So if we look at, you know, creating an engaging experience, and performance support, this is information that we can gather through that learner analysis. So when we talk to our learners and ask them how they like to learn and who or what do you rely on for help, we've already got that information, right? So we understand the types of learning experiences they're looking for. We understand what they need in the workplace to help them get through the tasks that they have to do. So all of that information we can use to help create and develop those tools that they'll need in the classroom and outside of the classroom. All right. So now we go on to implementation. Sorry, I went ahead a bit there. So implementation, and I'm going to sort of have another one of my caveats here. So implementation, I'm going to show you some things, but I'm going to sort of put a heavy emphasis on some, right? So for implementation, the things that I'm about to show you will depend entirely on the size and complexity of your solution. If you're creating a 10-minute e-learning on a new policy, you're not going to have to do any of these things whatsoever. But if you're rolling out a brand new system or a brand new, like a set of visions or culture or onboarding, you may need to do a little bit more to support the adoption of your learning, because implementation is all about making sure that the learning is adopted by the learners and implemented effectively. So the first thing we might want to do, we won't always have to do, is testing and iterating. So think about things like pilots. So especially if you're doing an activity that involves lots of learner engagement and it's got a big audience. So I'd say anytime you're doing training for more than 100 people, get 5 or 6 of them to test it out first, because it's better to get feedback from good or bad, right, from 5 or 6 people than it is to roll it out and suddenly you've got 100 people giving you feedback. So test and iterate, and it doesn't have to be the entire solution. So let's say you're designing a 2-day training course or 8 hours of e-learning. Just have them sample some bits and pieces of it, the things that you think are going to be the most impactful, the things that you hope will have the biggest effect on the learners. Test those pieces and get some feedback, and then you can kind of tweak and iterate as you need to. Train the trainer. So again, if you've got an instructor-led or virtual instructor-led training program, you may want to run a train the trainer session too, right? So this is a need. This is all needs analysis, understanding what you're going to need to make your training a success. Technology and accessibility, right? So when it comes to implementing the solution, you want to make sure that you've covered all the technology requirements that your stakeholder has given you. You need to make sure that you've met accessibility requirements. So does your e-learning need to be closed captioned? Do you need to have sort of screen reading compatibility turned on? Have you thought that through ahead of time? Have you made sure that your solution is going to be implemented well? You may need to market the training, right? So if it's something that you want the entire organization to know about, or even a handful of people, what kind of marketing might you need to create, or communication to help learners be aware of the training and also help shift those mindsets, right? To let them know, no, you have to do this. It's something that you need to do. And then any change management. And this is where we're going to talk about those barriers in just a moment. Very conscious of the time and I don't want to whiz through, but we're gonna get there. All right, so these are the things that we look at in implementation. I'm going to very quickly kind of flip that around to let you know what we need to be asking as part of our needs analysis, right? So we need to know, can we test the learning experience? Have we got the people to help us do that? Who are the facilitators? If we're using facilitators, what do they need? Are there any technology requirements, right? So understanding this all up front, all at the beginning as part of this sort of broad needs analysis is going to help avoid any surprises down the road. How are we going to let people know about the training? How will we address those barriers to learning and application? So technology and barriers your stakeholders can help you with, right? So at the beginning, we ask them, what are the project constraints? So understanding, tools, technology, cost, budget, scope, all of those things should come out in your conversation around constraints. Barriers, we look at barriers in 2 different ways. There's barriers to learning and there's barriers to application of the learning. So we'll take a quick peek at those. Barriers to learning, really important to understand what these might be. These are things that are within the learner's control, and they're usually those mindsets, attitudes, and beliefs. So we've already had a great case study in this with our sales team, right? Can't do it, won't do it, don't want to do it, right? We've given them the skills and the tools to do the sales database training. It was in their mind, their mindsets and their attitudes and their beliefs that actually stopped them from learning. So really important to surface these barriers before you start designing your learning program, so that you can create something that will kind of counter those barriers. And usually this is very easy to do. What we try to tap into here are things like, you know, their beliefs and their attitudes, with stories, with, you know, why stories. You know, why is this training important? Why does it matter to you? We call this the learner within, WIIFM. What's in it for me, right? So if we can figure out what that is and create those stories, put that at the very front of your training, then the learners will have that, oh, okay, I understand. Better yet, you can put it in your marketing or communication materials when you're trying to sort of entice the learners and let them know that they have to take this training, because usually they do have to. You can tackle those mindsets and attitudes and beliefs, cut them off before it becomes a problem. So understanding the barriers, really important upfront, and also to make sure that your implementation is successful. Application. This is something, interestingly, that's usually out of the learner's control, right? So I don't know if you've ever had this experience where you've gone to a training program, loved every minute of it, can't wait to get back and start applying what you've learned, and then suddenly you get back to work, it's like, nope, you can't do that here, or we're not set up for this. And that's really frustrating as a learner. And so really important to try to understand what those barriers might be. And it's usually things like systems and tools, right? So we don't have the right technology in place or the right systems. We don't have policies and procedures that support the learning. Maybe it's culture and people who are just sort of stand in your way. So when you're working with your stakeholder, and this is very much something that stakeholders will help you with, talk them through, okay, what are the barriers? When we've done this training, will the learners be able to go off and do the thing? And if not, what do we need to remove? What obstacles might be in the way, and how can we remove them for them? So all part of your upfront needs analysis. Nearly there, home stretch, evaluation. All right, final piece of the ADDIE framework, but as I mentioned, it's constantly going on, right? So this is where we determine how to evaluate the efficacy of the solution. So did the training, you know, did we design the training in the way that we should have? Was it effective? We want to understand what the learners thought about the training. Skills transfer, did they learn something? Performance, are they doing something differently now as a result of this training? And then finally, the business impact. And I am going to really just whiz over this, because we will have a separate session devoted to this. This is my love and my passion, and I can't wait to talk to you some more about it. But this is something we think about as our needs analysis, right? How are we going to do these things? So how will we know the design was successful? How will we measure that learner reaction? How will we measure skills, performance, business impact? All things that we need to be thinking about before we design any slides, before we create any facilitator guides. We need to have the answers to these questions. Learner reaction, we can get that, you know, we can start thinking about that by talking to our learners, right? Finding out how they like to learn, all of the questions we've talked about earlier, and then create surveys and feedback forms to say, all right, did this learning meet your need? Was it engaging? Was it relevant? Was it meaningful? Was it all the things that you were hoping it would be? For the others here, for performance and business, this is where we'll lean on our stakeholders to tell us, okay, this is what we were hoping this training would do. This is what performance we were looking for our team. This is the impact we were hoping it would have on the business. And we can use that to help develop the evaluation strategy. And I'm going to take a big breath because we are done. And I'm going to show you now, just as a quick summary, how those things line up, right? So you've got your ADDIE model here. S is your stakeholder, L is your learner. They're all kind of interconnected. We've got that big analysis we do up front, but then we're also asking these questions, getting that input all the way through the design, development, implementation, and evaluation process. Right, I'm going to pause. I have a little bit of time afterwards, so if you've got questions that we need to go beyond past, I can stick around. But turn it over to you. What questions do you have?
Fantastic
Oh, it's an
illustration, Emma.
amazing.
Thank you. I
Yeah,
have another question.
oh, go for it, Olama.
Okay. All right. So, when you decide to go with the instructor-led training, and you want to engage an external facilitator, is there any policy around whether there's the L&D specialist that designs the content or the external facilitator that designs it? How does it work?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it will really depend on the content, right? So if it's content and a subject matter that the internal trainer knows something about and can create themselves, then that's an arrangement that they would come to with a facilitator. Often, we use external facilitators because it is a skill set or a topic that we don't have that expertise with in-house. That's usually one of the reasons that we bring someone in. But yeah, it will depend case by case, I think, on what it is that needs to be trained, but great question.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Because the reason I asked is for consulting firms, especially, you notice that when you engage external facilitators, you already have the content prepared because it's the same content that is being used over time. So what they do normally is they send out those contents early enough for the facilitator to practice, then he or she comes to class and takes on the training. So I just wanted to know, in which case would you expect that the facilitator designs the content? So, but this is helpful, thank you.
Sure, yeah, I think it also will depend on the resources, right? So when I was a learning and development manager, I was there for 6 years, but in the beginning it was just me. So I didn't have the time to be facilitating constantly. I did a lot of facilitating, but I would bring facilitators in quite a lot. And sometimes I would train our sales team. So then I would do a train the trainer so that then they could teach the material. So yeah, I think it really does depend. In your case with a consultant, it may just be that that's the arrangement that they've got with the business. I think it depends. It may be a cost-cutting exercise, right? Because consultants can be really expensive. So it may be just like a nice way to meet in the middle where you take some of that expense away by developing the training yourself and then just bringing in a facilitator. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Oh, sure. Thanks for the question.
Wow. Great, great, great. Do we have any other questions? I mean, it's been such... Oh, great. It's been such an amazing time. I mean, I've learned, quite a lot today as well. I mean, it's such a detailed presentation by you, Emma, and I'm sure everyone here had something to take away. And thank you so much also for the resources that you're giving to us for the slides, the free ebook. You mentioned that there's an ebook that you're going to be sharing. And the one thing that I really just love to emphasize again, just as part of what you mentioned earlier, is that learning is not always the answer to a performance issue. It's very, very important that you do your need analysis because this can save your organization a lot of money. I mean, you gave such an amazing example about the need analysis you did, and you realized that people just were not motivated to learn. The resources were there and there was no need to teach them. So they just needed motivation, and that helped them. So thank you so much for that. Do we have any other question in the chat? While we wait for questions, please feel free, everyone, to connect with us on all our social media handles, LinkedIn, Instagram, on YouTube. And if you haven't joined the community on WhatsApp, the link is in the chat. And we also have a survey link for you to tell us what you would like to learn about. So that will determine who we invite to come and speak to us and all that. So let us know what you have challenges with. Let us know what you like to learn. And if you're watching the replay on YouTube, feel free to put in the chat as well, whatever you would like to learn about. I'll just quickly, while we wait for more questions, show us about just a very short video about our conference coming up in May. It's happening in about 3 weeks' time, about 4 weeks, May 8th and 9th, just for us to have an idea of the lineup of the speakers that we have. I will just quickly share with us now. And please, if you have a question, please keep putting them in the chat. All right. If you can see my screen, please let me know.
I can see it.
All right, then. Can you hear the is the video playing on your side?
No, I see your question time. Actually, I see your question time window.
Oh, okay, okay. I will just try that. Let me stop sharing and try again. I mean, at times you just have to switch it off and try again.
And it's never the same. Every time I come to Zoom, something's changed.
Absolutely. I mean, the video is playing, but it's not showing here. Let's see. Can you see anything?
I see you scrolling. See like a background that says connect with us, links in the chat.
Okay, I'll do it in a different way. Sorry.
Mhm.
I mean, technology just chooses the way, whether it wants to cooperate with you or not at times. It's interesting. Well, with it, please, guys. All right. Yeah, I'm there now, so I'll just share my screen again. Guys, thank you for being patient with me. There you are. So I guess we can, seems to be loading. Yeah, can you see it now, guys?
The conference 2024 screen.
Yes, so as we can see, we have 26 days to go. We are really, really excited about this. And the theme for this year's conference here is about learning how to design learning experiences that help impact positively return on investment. And we're going to be having speaker sessions, panel sessions, and e-learning design workshop as well. We have the list of people that can attend, whether you're a current L&D professional or transitioning into L&D, a trainer, content developer, fresh graduate from any discipline, wanting to transition, technical writers, immigrants intending to transition to tech as learning professionals, teachers desiring to transition to tech career where their skills are very much transferable. So we have a lineup of speakers, and this is a conference schedule. That's me here for the opening address. We have Sharon from India, Larry from Nigeria, Karen from South Africa, Christina from Europe, Ebon from Nigeria. We have Helen Onesimus, and this is day 1. Day 2, if you click on this Thursday night, May takes you to day 2, and then you can see the list of speakers for the second day. We're going to be learning different things from how to build an e-learning business to AI in learning design, leveraging AI, need analysis, instructional design, flowing experiences, panel discussions, and much more. So it promises to be an exciting time. And if you want to register, you have the link there. Just click on register. It takes you to the page where you can register. We're launching this week. The campaign is going to be launched. So we have 16 people that have registered already, without much campaign done. And we have Genially and Butter platform sponsoring us on this conference. So watch out on social media for more information about the conference. Thank you so, so much. So our time is fast spent. I want us to show some love to Emma in the chat, for a wonderful time. It's been amazing. Thank you so much for the detailed, oh, Larry said the video is not showing. I guess that was before. Yeah. So thank you for the detailed information about need analysis from, using the ADDIE framework from analysis to implementation to evaluation. And we're going to be welcoming Emma as well. Emma, in June or July, we'll communicate back to you to talk to us on evaluation, learning evaluation, detailed, a detailed webinar on learning evaluation. So make it a date. Watch out in the community and your email. Thank you so much, Emma. I mean, it's been amazing having you here today. Thank you so, so, so much. And this brings us to the end of our session today. Feel free to connect with us on all our platforms. The link is in the chat. And then bye for now. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.